What's up, heathens? How ya doing? Today we're going to be talking to this guy again.
So I proved God. That is the proof. It's not that I proved God. I'm just pointing out what nature is, what we see in life, and that nature cannot produce that. So may you be honest with yourself, and may you realize that nature cannot put things in functional sequences without a mind.
So yes, we're going to be talking to Jeremy today. Jeremy has some ideas on how to prove God. He's going to do it very disingenuously. He's only going to have fallacies to support his position. So I hope that you guys are ready for more fallacies to prove God's existence. If you are, then please stay tuned.
I can prove that God exists to anyone who is honest with themselves.
Okay, sorry to stop so soon, but already he's setting up this entire video to call atheists liars. Because, as you can tell, he's like, I can prove that God exists to anybody that's honest to themselves, implying that those that don't believe in God or don't believe the things that he's going to say are lying to themselves. If you don't remember, Braxton Hunter last week tried to do this as well. No, atheists aren't lying to themselves. No, we're not dishonest in any kind of way when we're talking about the God question. This is just genuinely what we believe. And I would really appreciate it if the theist community would stop trying to paint us as these disingenuous or dishonest type of people. We're not.
All life contains genes and proteins. These genes are this functional information made up of nucleotides into functional sequences. All right? Proving that nucleotides can come about naturally and connect to each other does not prove abiogenesis or chemical evolution or it doesn't negate the need for a creator.
I would agree. Proving some natural process in the universe or in reality does not negate a creator necessarily. But it does prove that we do not need a creator to explain those types of things. Everything in the past that has needed a creator to explain it has been later explained by natural processes. So all this means is that God wasn't necessary for that particular natural process to happen, like abiogenesis. We don't necessarily need a God for abiogenesis to happen or for life to come from non-life, which I know a lot of creationists like to say that the law of biogenesis is somehow an actual law, but it's not. It was just a phrase that was coined by Louis Pasteur when he did his experiments concerning life coming from like rotting dead flesh or whatever. All Louis Pasteur disproved was the idea of spontaneous generation, which was the ruling idea at the time.
All right. Proteins, which are made up of amino acids, showing that amino acids could come about naturally, which is what the Miller-Urey experiment did, does not prove that life could create itself. Those amino acids have to be put into functional sequences. So many of you have sent me scientific papers and you've sent me things, and none of them show that nature could put nucleotides into functional sequences for genes, for DNA, for RNA, functional DNA, RNA, and functional genes. And none of them show me that amino acids would arrange themselves into functional sequences necessary for life.
You know, this is an incredibly small gap for your God to live in, which is what you're proposing here is a God of the gaps theory. Like I mentioned before, any kind of gap in our knowledge was once filled by God. But once we were able to explain that gap with natural processes, there is no longer a need for a God to be able to explain that particular phenomenon. Now, if you want a really good scientific look at Jeremy and all of his fallacious stuff he's talking about here, as far as the biology goes, then I would highly suggest taking a look at Aaron Ra's video on Jeremy. In that video, he highlights a bunch of different creators in the community that handled the more scientific, like the scientifically in-depth sort of portion of Jeremy's arguments. I would highly suggest any of the people that Aaron Ra mentions in his video. That would be people like Dragnot Silvas, Concordance, and some other people. Basically, back on topic now, he's presenting a God of the gaps argument. Just because we don't have the explanations for those particular things, that doesn't necessarily mean that God exists by default. You still have the burden of proof to show that God is necessary for that explanation. But see, the problem is with creationists, you don't have any experiments that you can run that show that a God is needed to explain that. There are no experiments, no observations whatsoever that you can make that would leave the only option being a designer. Another thing is that all this shows is that we have a momentary gap in our knowledge. That's all that it does.
And you need both of them. If you have just the functional information for life, you have just genes, well, you need proteins to turn those into other proteins or structures. All right. If you just have proteins, well, that's nothing, because you need that information recorded so that more could be made. If nature were by accident to make a functional protein, well, that wouldn't matter because you need the record for it. And so what you need is a simultaneous evolution of functional information and proteins, and that would never happen because you're talking about a very long sequence that has to be functional in the hundreds, right? Not all of them in the hundreds, but some proteins I think are even 1,000 amino acids long. So you're talking about this long sequence that has to be functional.
This is the basic personal incredulity argument. He can't understand how these things could naturally occur. Therefore, that means that they can't naturally occur. Just because you don't understand something doesn't mean that it can't happen. And it's also not proof that it can't happen. I mean, I don't know a lot of things in this world, and I'm perfectly fine admitting that. And I can learn a whole lot more about the creation versus evolution topic in general. But still, the fact that I don't know something about biology or natural processes concerning abiogenesis doesn't necessarily mean that God exists by default.
Now, here's some things that atheists try to say. There's this dumb belief by Richard Dawkins, I believe, and Brian Cox, that if monkeys were typing on a typewriter for an infinite amount of time, they would eventually come up with Shakespeare, works of Shakespeare. And that's ridiculous. And here's why. They're thinking about it in the wrong way. They're thinking that all possible outcomes would come about. And I disagree. And here's why. Nature doesn't keep a record. Nature doesn't say, well, I've already tried that and that didn't work, right? Nature's just randomly connecting nucleotides and amino acids, and these monkeys would just be randomly typing. They're not keeping track and saying, well, we already tried that. Let's change this. Right. And so you need to look at it in this way. In order for monkeys to type out a work of Shakespeare, they would have to make sure it's mistake free. There are no mistakes in it. Right. That's where monkeys can't do that. They can't look at what they're typing and avoid mistakes. Nature doesn't know it's trying to produce genes. Nature doesn't know it's trying to produce functional proteins when it's connecting nucleotides for the genes and amino acids for the proteins. And therefore, it's not trying to make it mistake-free. It's just connecting them randomly together. And I made a video called The Atheist Test, where I tell you to try the same thing. Randomly type blindly on a computer without autocorrect, in roughly 200 characters or so, and see if you can come up with a functional paragraph. It's not going to happen. You could come up with some 3-letter words. It's hard to get a 4-letter word. It's hard to get words in a row. It's hard to get a complete sentence, let alone a paragraph. And that's what would be equivalent to coming up with functional genes and functional proteins. And even if nature could do that, it has to get them to work together, which would be very hard. So,
I wonder exactly how much time did you spend just randomly typing on your keyboard to be able to get words and shit? I'm just kind of curious. I would love to see those work hours for how much time you spent on that. But also another thing is that everything that you described about the infinite monkey theory is a straw man. Also, I don't understand your comparison to the monkeys and nature. Why would the monkeys need to be able to self-correct? Why? Because the whole purpose of the infinite monkey theory, or the infinite time with the monkeys typing on the typewriter theory, is an example of probability. Given enough sample space, something that is a very low probability to happen will 100% happen. That is the point of that particular theory, and it wasn't coined by Dawkins or anybody else. It actually has a very far-reaching history. The concept of it does, reaching all the way back to Aristotle. In fact, the first instance of the whole monkey theorem reaches back to 1913 by Emile Boyle or something like that. And he was a French mathematician. And it's only an example to show how probability works. Because all of these like instances, whether it's the natural process of abiogenesis and those natural processes that have to happen for that to happen, or if it's monkeys typing on a typewriter, they're all independent interaction. And when you have these independent interactions, no matter how many it takes in order to generate the desired one, whether it be typing out a full sentence, full paragraph, the complete works of Shakespeare, regardless of all that, regardless of how small the probability is that would happen, given a big enough sample space, it is 100% guaranteed to happen. That is all that particular example or that theory, that thought experiment is supposed to show to you. And what you basically did here with your refutation of it is show that you don't know probabilities, you don't know statistics, you don't know any of that. You have no concept of those ideas.
So I proved God. That is the proof. It's not that I proved God. I'm just pointing out what nature is, what we see in life, and that nature cannot produce that.
No, you did not prove God. None of that was a proof of God. All you highlighted was that, oh, there are gaps in our knowledge, if not just my knowledge. That's all you proved. Just because you have a gap in your knowledge or that you're personally incredulous about these particular topics. That is the only thing that you prove. Now, I task you with providing me an experiment or some kind of observation in nature where God has meddled with natural processes or God was needed in order to do those things. Because what you just did does not actually prove God. It just proves that we have more research to do. That's it.
So may you be honest with yourself, and may you realize that nature cannot put things in functional sequences without a mind. All right. Just like you randomly typing blindly, just pecking at a computer, you would not be able to make a functional paragraph. Nature would not be able to put these nucleotides in functional sequences or amino acids into functional sequences.
Citation needed. Also, I would love for you to be able to tell me how exactly you know what I can or cannot do. I don't know. Do you have like cameras in my place or something? Like, do you just watch me all the time? Because that's creepy. Like, it's creepy when your God does it. Like, even, I don't believe in your God, but just the whole idea of God watching you all the time and knowing what you're thinking, that's creepy as fuck. But you putting cameras in my place to watch me is just somehow creepier.
But here's what this doesn't mean. All right, for you to say that we were created is being honest, and I hope you're honest with yourself. If not, you're a liar. And I'm going to start calling atheists liars after they hear this.
Wow, really? Okay, for one thing, I am honest with myself. That's actually the biggest hurdle that I had to overcome to get past the whole God question, or to get past that point in my life, was admitting to myself that I didn't believe in a God. That's not being dishonest. That's not being dishonest with myself. That's not lying to myself. That's actually being truthful with myself. I was lying to myself when I was trying to convince myself that I needed to be in church, or that I needed to believe in God, or that I needed to be a good Christian boy. That's when I was lying to myself, because I didn't really want to go to church. I didn't really care about being a good Christian boy. I was just taught that those were things that you needed to be. I take it very personally when you call me a liar just because I don't believe in a God, because you can't handle the fact that people out there don't believe in a God, or you have some Bible verse from Romans that says that I'm lying to you, to myself, and to everybody else. That doesn't mean jack shit, because the Bible can't know how I feel about something, what I personally believe. I don't give a shit what your holy book says.
Right. So I might make a video called Atheists Are Liars. And in the video, I'll say, I'll explain these things. And I'll say, well, now if you say there's no creator, you're a liar.
Wait, is that not just what you did? Because you just explained your quote unquote proof for God and everything. And then you were like, after you hear all this, I'm just going to call you a liar now. So now we're just all liars to him. Way to go. Way to go with the ad hominem attack to pile on to all of your other fucking fallacies that you presented here in this video.
And so what it doesn't mean is, it doesn't mean that you've got to adopt a religion. You can say that we don't know who the creator is, right? You're just following evidence one at a time. And right now you know that there is a creator based on what I just told you. No rational person should come to the conclusion that there is a creator based on the
evidence that you gave, because you didn't actually give any evidence. All you did was cite gaps in your own personal knowledge or gaps in our scientific knowledge. And just because you did that doesn't mean by default God exists. See, a lot of Christians out there have this weird idea that God exists by default, and it's the atheists that have to prove that God doesn't exist. That's not actually the situation. The actual situation is that Christians have to be able to prove their God. They have a book. Okay, good for you. You got a fucking book. Harry Potter's got a book too, but that doesn't mean he exists by default.
The other thing is this does not refute biological evolution. You could say that the creator, whoever it was, or creators, started, I would say it would have to at least have made bacteria, archaea, and in the eukaryotic cells, which bacteria are prokaryotic cells. Because I know they think that prokaryotic cell swallowed another prokaryotic cell and that made it a eukaryotic cell. But man, there's just some, start really looking at what happens inside of a cell, and you're going to be like, yeah, I don't think that happens.
So basically, you don't understand the complex chemical mechanisms that go into the symbiotic relationship between a prokaryotic cell that is similar to mitochondria, and how another prokaryotic cell swallowed it up. And because of that symbiotic relationship between the two prokaryotic cells, they became eukaryotic cells. Or, well, they started down the path of developing into eukaryotic cells. We have scientific experiments that have shown this to happen. We know why it happens. We know how it happens. And it's happened since the development of eukaryotic cells. So I don't see how you can sit there and be like, oh, man, you know this can't happen because it is way too complex for me to understand. Holy shit! Can you just imagine? That's how eukaryotic cells, that just seems ridiculous, doesn't it? Oh, God is proven because that's ridiculous, because I said so. That's just a dipshit thing to say.
So I believe a creator at least had to make those cells, and then you could say that biological evolution took over.
Another thing here is that the Thanos snap of God is not an explanation for anything. Just because you think God, snapped everything into existence, well, mainly those three types of organisms, like that just shows that you're using God of the gaps. You're showing that, oh, we don't know how these organisms first developed, so therefore God had to do it. That's what this entire video has been about. The idea that God exists by default. And if we can't explain it scientifically, then that means God is the reason why it happened. But this has been proven throughout the ages to be superseded by natural explanations as soon as we can explain that gap. So I don't know what you're hoping to do with this video other than insult atheists, but it's definitely not proving God.
But please be honest with yourself. Don't be a liar. Don't lie to yourself. Don't lie to other people and say that there is no creator. And here's another thing I'm noticing. If you are doing that, if you're ignoring the science and saying that there is no God and you're spreading that message, do you realize you're probably causing divorces? Because I read something today, and an atheist posted, that a lady was stressed and she was trying to teach her, or she was trying to convince her husband who left the faith to come back to the faith, and the atheist put the divorce as the option, and so you guys are breaking up marriages by lying to people. I understand if you're just telling the truth, and people do need to know the truth, but you're lying to people and telling them that there is no creator.
Actually, I'm not lying to anybody. I'm talking about my own personal belief. And if I was giving my personal opinion to that woman, I would tell her that she's got to come to some sort of compromise with her husband, or just not even bring up religion whatsoever. If religion is that important to her, then yeah, divorce may be the only option if that is a deal breaker. But I don't think that it has to be a deal breaker. Now, I'm not causing divorces. I've not caused anybody else's divorce or anything like that. And no atheist out there should have that levied against them, that they are causing divorces. This would be, a false cause fallacy, a slippery slope fallacy. I don't know. You got so many fallacies in this video, it's kind of hard to keep up. But just because we say that we don't believe in a God doesn't mean that other people people are going to get divorced because of it. Nobody's causing divorces except for the two people that are in that marriage. Those are the two people that cause the divorce to happen. So your attempt here to shame atheists, to try to tell us that we're liars, to try to convince us to stop talking about, our own beliefs when these things come up or something like that, is just so shitty of you to do. Because Christians, they don't shut up. They insert God into every fucking thing. But atheists are supposed to be the ones to not, talk about God whenever it comes up. Like, we're just supposed to be like, no, I don't believe in God, so I'm just not going to even talk about this. Which is a perfectly fine thing if you want to do that. I've had to do it a couple times in my life. But we shouldn't by default have to shut up about what we believe about this question or what we know about this question. It runs totally antithetical to the entire purpose of this channel, to stand up and use your voice, to speak out against dipshits like this specifically, who tell you that you need to, quit lying to yourself or quit being a liar or to straight up call you a liar. Like, fuck guys like this. I'm sorry, Jeremy, you were nice when you came onto my channel, but this is a little far. Just straight up calling us liars now? Fuck you, buddy. Anyways, heathens, I hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think about Jeremy and his whole liar thing or his proof for God down in the comments section. While you're down there, make sure you smash that like button and subscribe if you like this kind of content. Don't forget to check out these links over here, and always stand up and use your voice. Don't be shot down by dipshits like this. Bye, heathens.